my first time for Argen. I'm very excited. Just for my side, who does not know me, my name is Alexander Wünsche. I'm the owner or co-owner of Zahntechnique Dental Laboratory in Miami. We are a small boutique-style, high-end laboratory, so we're kind of concentrating on full arch cases, full mouth restorations, basically. We're planning with our clients a lot of cases. We do a lot of aesthetic cases. We're kind of focusing on the relationship between the laboratory and the client and the patient. That's our focus point, right? We're doing basic patient customized dentistry. That's where we really our philosophy lays on. We're not a quantity lab. We don't spit out 200 crowns a day. We don't do that, right? So there's nothing wrong with doing this, by the way. There's just a different business philosophy. As you also can see, the reason why I live in Florida is because I love the water. I'm a waterman. So every single second I have not on the bench, I'm actually in the water. And surfing, paddleboarding, whatever it is, basically. I love to do snowboarding as well. It's not here, it's too cold. The snowboard season starting very soon for me. Back in Germany, where I'm from, basically, I used to be a competitive snowboarder. So I'm like between teeth and sporting, something on a board, that was my life, or is my life, basically, what I'm doing. Besides fun on the water, we have a lab, right? That's Zahntechnique, that's my team. We see a small team, 11 people. And we try to have fun as well, as you can tell, right? It's not just a boring thing. We're like a family, actually, in the lab. We're sitting together, we have lunch together, we're celebrating birthdays together, and we're celebrating with our clients together success, right? So that's like really what we love to do. And that success can be just a simple denture. That success can be a full mouth rehabilitation. I don't care, actually. Teeth for me are teeth. If you do it in acrylic, in PMMA, or if you do it in zirconia, it doesn't matter for me. Right? So that's why I want to take you guys on my journey, what I like to do and how we do our kind of things in the lab. We're doing maybe some like in a different way than some other people doing their business. Again, there are always multiple routes to go to final destination. I will never tell you that's right or wrong if it's not completely not right in terms of a material usage, right? But besides having the lab and working on an everyday basis there, I also do a lot of education, like what I'm doing today. That was throughout COVID, where we were locked in and we were in the lab. It didn't work because everybody went home. And I did basically every week a webinar. We did a client connect with our clients. So we had a little COVID study club running for a few weeks, basically, where we met all once a week with our clients, and whoever wants to join, basically, we did a webinar every week. It was fun for the first 4 times, and then it bores the shit out of me because I was zoomed out. I wanted to hug people again. I want to see people. So that's what we're doing right now, right? That personal interaction, that was always very important for me. It is very important for me. So, but today, we are having an agenda. We have 1.5 hours together. Or was it 3 hours, Donnie?
1.5.
Ah, damn. Okay. We may have to short this a little bit. Anyway, we have an agenda today. So today I want to talk to you about treatment planning. And again, that's my way of doing treatment planning. Doesn't mean that your treatment planning is not correct, right? They're just different ways. I hope you can take something home from today's day and apply it on Monday maybe in your lab. We'll talk about record collection, the different methods, what we have nowadays and what we're using. We'll talk about prototyping, which is very important, restorative solutions, and different zirconia types, right? Because zirconia is most likely right now, besides 3D printed resin, that material which gets the most of the push in terms of different developments, and it doesn't stop right now, right? So we're testing already new zirconia coming out, which is very exciting. What's kind of coming in our benches very soon in the next 1 or 2 years, and we always think, oh man, how can we get something even better than that, right? And it's possible. That's the amazing thing. So treatment planning in my lab or in my philosophy starts usually always at the facial analysis. Every case I'm asking for photos. I'm not doing any anterior work without seeing the patient. I have to see the patient ideally in photos. Usually we FaceTime if it's not a local client, or the patient comes to my lab and I do my own photos, and we have a photo studio in the lab. So in a facial analysis, what is a facial analysis? We look at the face, obviously, right? So important is we have two shots, 2 photos. One is a smile and the other one is a retracted photo. Important is these both photos have to be full face. Why do you have to be full face? I'll show you in a couple slides. But what we do first, we look at the photos and we realize the left side and the right side mirrored together. So you see these are both left sides just mirrored and put together, and these are both right sides mirrored put together. Looks like a different person, but it's the same patient. What is the learning process out of that? We're not symmetric, right? So every patient has a dominant and a less dominant portion in your side of your face. It's normal, right? If you look at your face, I can immediately tell you which is more dominant, less dominant. Some patients have that more pronounced, some patients less. If you look at my face, for example, now what I tell you, I have a crooked nose. It completely goes to one side. We'll tell you also which one is the more dominant side, of course, right? Because I broke my nose 3 times already, right? So that's why my nose is not straight anymore. So that's the same here. So nobody is really symmetric. Sometimes you break your nose as a kid, you don't even know it's broken, and it grows crooked, right? That's how it happens. So that's important. Why is this important, by the way? Let's go back very quick. Because if we planning an aesthetic case in the anterior region, which is usually premolar to premolar or even more, we have to define the buccal corridor correct. We could theoretically make a case completely symmetric for the midline of the nose, for example, or between the eyes, and the midline visually, aesthetically is shifted because the face is not symmetric. So we have to look at the whole face, the whole picture of the buccal corridor and the aesthetic midline, not the symmetric midline, and create that ideal midline that the patient gets the imagination of symmetry. Because patients, unfortunately, are too good educated nowadays. We would wish they would be less educated, actually, because they're coming with expectations to us, which sometimes is overwhelming for ourselves, right? And I did a webinar actually, beginning of the week about social media, the first time ever I did that kind of topic. And it was just very interesting when I did my research, because in my research, I really learned so much about patient education and how well and actually not well they're educated, but they think they know everything. And coming to your clients, right, and tell them, I want to have this, and please do this. And the clients, if they don't have the experience to communicate with the patient correctly, they will tell you guys or us, well, we need to do this and this. And we sit there and say, we can't. It's impossible, right? But we have to evaluate that situation correctly to give our clients the good advice. By the way, any doctors here, any dentists here today? Can you leave very quick for 5 minutes? No, I'm just kidding. It's just one, guys, okay? We can talk clear here. So for the records, we already talked about this. I need basically 2 main photos, right? This in the middle here and this here. I need a retracted and a smile photo, but they have to be full face. That's very important. I'll show you in a second why. And then, of course, I can zoom into the retracted photo to get a better picture of the case. This patient, for example, was complaining about his wear facets in 8 and 9, was complaining about the black triangles with 8 and 9 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, and the disbalanced gingival architecture. So we discussed that, and then we will evaluate and make a digital wax up and see what can be fixed to what pocket, right? That's the next thing, right? Do we really have to adjust the gingival architecture to the patient's liking? Is he willing to pay for that on the clinical side, right? That's very important. So we can give different treatment approaches from our side for your clients to make them look like a rock star. That's the goal. That's the goal. Our goal is, we're working somewhere in the dark corner. Our goal is to make our clients, you, look like a rock star, basically, for your patients. That's the goal. I was flying here, working on my lecture, right? And the guy next to me was looking in his, oh my God, are you a dentist? And, no, I'm not. I'm just a technician. What is that? I know, nobody knows us, right? That's our curse, basically. But hey, I'm fine with that. Anyway, let's go back to this guy here. And so you see now why it's important to have the full face, because the face is full of landmarks, right? So we have to utilize these landmarks to merge, to superimpose the faces in our CAD/CAM software together to do a proper treatment planning and execution of a design, right? So here the eyes, number 8, I took here as a landmark, and that allows you to merge these two faces together. Why do I need that? Because I have to see the smile when I design a case in exocad, for example. That's what we use the most, right? And I have to do the retracted situation because I have to see, well, how can we actually create the gingival architecture if we have to change this? How can we create the buccal corridor? I have to be able to see everything. So then I go to a digital design. And that basically here looks like it's just 2-dimensional, but it's not. It's actually, an exocad is 3-dimensional, right? So I put molds in place, let him smile. That basically can send that photo to the patient or to the doctor, and they can discuss it with the patient, and the patient will tell, yep, that's what I like, and no, I don't like this, we have to change, the teeth are too prominent, too long, too short, whatever it is. He liked that, that was his goal basically, so we target that look. And at the same time, we can create the three-dimensional setup. In Exocad, we have that split screen, right, where we actually plan in 2 dimensions, and on the side we have the 3-dimension where we put the molds in the right place also for function, which is really important. The problem on DSD, where DSD is coming from, was actually everything is planned on a photograph in 2 dimensions. So we tend to overpromise a patient a solution or a result and we underdeliver. That's the biggest issue what we have in our job. We overpromise, we underdeliver, right? So we rather underpromise and overdeliver. That's the goal. So with this, we actually can do that, right? So here we have that digital mock-up or digital wax-up, and that record can be used later on after prepping the teeth. And that's a tooth-borne case now. After prepping the teeth can be used to design the crown and bridge work, what that patient was looking for, right? Here in this patient, we had all different coloration on preparations because there were some dead teeth, some root canal teeth basically. There were some implants in the future coming on number 6, for example. So we decided here to actually have a layered case. So we're doing a PFZ situation. So we're utilizing a zirconia with a higher opacity instead of a high translucent zirconia to mask basically everything underneath. And by the way, it's a little bit confusing sometimes when you read zirconia explanation. HT nowadays is actually LT, right? It's actually lower translucent. With HT zirconia, we still can actually already mask underneath discolorations, even a titanium implant. SHT, this super high translucent, that's where it ends, right? That's where it's really translucent, very aesthetic, so it will show whatever is underneath if you have a certain thickness. Keep in mind, when you have zirconia more than 1 millimeter thick, you tend to block out almost everything underneath with the HT, okay? So that's important. And then we see here the final result on this patient. From the planning stage to the final. So now we can go from here, we even over-exaggerating this now, to the emotional smile consultation, right? Very similar scenario, patient, it's a female patient, and we can tell she's not happy with her smiles and they need some changes basically. So here we planned that case the same way we planned the gentleman before. And then the doctor in this case put a mock-up, right? So created a matrix in the patient's mouth with Luxatemp in this case to show her the life smile design, what we envisioned for her. I would wish I could work so fast actually, it was amazing. Anyway, so and then important is for our dentists in the room today, important is don't show that patient the mirror. Don't give the patient any mirrors or so. No, videotape or take photos with your phone or with your tablet. Why is it important? Because, and you're the only one in the first row, I'd take you now. When I have a conversation with you, I don't do this now, I'm not being so close to you, right? I'm usually being 3 feet apart, right? That's our usual distance to a patient or to a person we talk. So that's how you take the photo. Then you have a live picture. And then we show that video to the patient. We ask her in this case to dance. I don't know if I can hear that. It's magic. She wants to sing. That's all right. Play music, right? I sing. So she did that. And we video recorded her with the iPad. You did magic. You're a unicorn. So afterwards, we showed the video to her and want to see her reaction to her new smile.
Are you ready? Yes. You ready? See this? I want to see. Okay. You haven't seen yourself in the mirror, right? No. Okay. That's it.
So the reaction speaks for itself, right? You see, she loves it. She loves it, and that's like already the first ticket to actually do the case. So some patients need that emotional smile design or need that emotional step to really say, all right, that's it, I want to do that immediately. That's awesome, right? So that's another way to do these things in a treatment process. So now if the patient decides to treatment for the treatment, or we can start the case, and we're prepping or we're taking implant impressions, etc., etc., etc. It doesn't matter what it is, we have to do record taking. So now record taking nowadays for prep teeth, we take an intraoral scan or take a PVS impression, right? I don't tell you what's better or worse, it doesn't matter. In the hands and the right technique, both works fantastic, right? There's nothing better or worse. I prefer digital impressions. Usually on veneers, I prefer physical impressions, right? That's just my preference. For record taking in implants, we have an analog technique, so we can do an open tray technique here. We have photogrammetry nowadays, which is evolving rapidly with new technologies and new devices. I have to say though, and that's not a secret, I love photogrammetry, but I also know it's not here to stay. Because iOS intraoral scanning is catching up so rapidly with technology and getting better that we don't need photogrammetry at some point down the road. And we're not talking about 10 years, we're talking about the time frame 1 and 3 years, right? So keep that in mind because the investment in photogrammetry is pretty high, right? There are devices coming out that are more affordable as well, but it's still, just evaluate for yourself if you would have the ROI back in a certain amount of time that it makes sense. So that's PIC. We did 35 or 30 PIC cases, PIC cases, a few years ago when PIC entered the US market as a beta test, and results were fantastic. We had 100% success in terms of fitting, passive fit on day of surgery or day after, right? So really, really good. iMagic is another company who utilize photogrammetry, also extremely accurate, same as PIC, just a different setup in terms of the workflow. Micromapper, I just did recently a case with the Micromapper, also phenomenal, right? Micromapper even comes out now, you can scan the soft tissue surface. I think next month even already, right? With the new updates. A really, really cool system, works very well. And then OptiSplint is like a hybrid. We don't call it photogrammetry, we call it grammetry, because it's not fully digital. It's more like an analog, almost like an analog verification jig you take in the mouth, what you can send physically to the lab, and we actually can make a passive mastercast for analogs with that jig, which helps just to confirm passive fit as an accuracy. It's a cool tool, right? So we did also a few cases, actually a lot of cases with OptiSplint, works absolutely cool, right? So you see, I'm not preferring one or the other. I think every technology there, every technique has its advantages and disadvantages. You have to find the right way for yourself, what's really working for you. This is an interesting system as well. The Revex from Straumann, it's a reverse scan body scan. Do you see an upper here? This is really cool for the lower, actually. Why? Because on intraoral scanning, on the lower arch, there are 0 landmarks because everything is moving. There's no palate, there are no retromolar pads. There's nothing basically on the lower, right? On the lower. So for the lower, it's really great to have a immediate loaded provisional, taken out, put scan bodies on, and reverse scan it. Because outside of the mouth, the scan is much more accurate than inside of the mouth. That's just the stitching problem with the software, which it's reality, it's just proven, right? So that's a very cool process, but that's an extra step, so to also keep that in mind. That's not a process you're looking for the quickest turnaround time and quickest step ever. That's not it, right? It's a very accurate process though. And then after record taking with whatever record you decide to do, right? We're doing a temporization basically, right? So in this case, for example, how do I evaluate when a temporary gets seated to do the final? Every temporary is a prototype. I remember, so my uncle used to have a lab and I was doing my education there and he always tells me, don't make the temporaries too beautiful because they never come back. It's BS. Right? You have to make the temporary as much beautiful as you can do the final, not better. Yes, you have to make them as good as you can make the final if your abilities, because you are going to copy the temporary as a prototype in the final. That's your goal. That will cut out time of your workflow. So here, that's the starting treatment planning. We have a photo. We're marking the plane of occlusion here. We're marking our retracted view. And then we're setting up the teeth as a digital wax up basically before we then going to the finalization for the provisional, and we have a cant. So somewhere we screwed up and the doctor delivered the temp. So here now actually there was temp shell, so maybe he screwed up in aligning the temp. Maybe I didn't give him a proper seating guide for temporaries. Could be too. It doesn't matter, right? This is a small case, this is an anterior case. We can fix that quick. So with that photo, what he gave me now, I can basically evaluate where we have to adjust the horizontal, and I can fix that in the final because that's easy to measure, and we can have the final restoration done. We don't have to do another provisional for that little fix, right? You have to all evaluate that as well. So that's the final. The patient was very happy, right? So it's a very straightforward process. The doctor even could theoretically fix the temporary in terms of cutting the slightly after he takes the photo. It's very important. Why? Because we have the design in our computer. We have to be able to transfer the photo again to our software to align that and to finish it. Another case here, that's a more involved case. Completely collapsed occlusal, right? We have lost at least 5-6 millimeter. We do also a treatment planning here the same way. And then we're creating provisional shells for the anterior 6, and we're creating 2-300 bridges on implants for the posterior 3 on each side, right? And we're creating a seating jig. That seating jig is key. That's what you need. That's what you need to successfully keep full control over aesthetics and function when you do provisionals on a full arch. So here with the seating jig, we model printed, we creating the provisionals. They're milled in PMMA here. And they're fitting perfectly in that seating jig. So the doctor then on day of preparation prepares the anterior 6, puts first the implant bridges in the posterior area, screws them down, and then retrofits the shells over the preparations. And then because of the implant bridges, they are rigid, they are where they are, they don't move. Obviously, it's implants. So we can actually successfully seat that 300, that 600 bridge over these implant bridges and utilize them basically as a rest, as a key. And we have the case seated, right? So now it's ready for the lower basically because we have to open the vertically in this case. Same here, right? That's a, sorry, that's too quick. Let's go back very quick. It's a very involved case as well here because we have just one implant, so we have to do 2 seating jigs, right? So we basically are prepping the arch in stages. On one day though, but in stages with 2 seating jigs to be able to seat first the anterior, then the posterior, or vice versa, right? Here you see the posterior crowns are seated with the jig over the non-prepped anterior, then we prep the anterior teeth, and then we can seat basically the provisional shells in the anterior with resting on the posterior temps. They are perfectly seated and will allow us then to finish the case. Here the provisionals, and then here the finals. The papilla we can't bring back in this case, unfortunately. This case was a very involved case, very similar to the case prior. I showed this case on an aesthetic meeting because he's a model in Miami, and he went to Colombia to get composite veneers. They were beautiful, as you can tell on the left side. These were his brand new composite veneers, 4 weeks old. He was not very happy, obviously, right? So he came back, and then his doctor took him in and said, you know what, we have to change that. So we did a mock-up here, and then we finished his full mouth in basically one shot, right? So she prepped everything, took records like we discussed basically, and then we were able to actually finish his case in a very short amount of time with not really a lot of headaches. But that just works if you keep track, if you really take the records correctly, what we discussed already, and when you see the provisionals are key here because they will establish your occlusion, they will establish your aesthetics and function, right? And you have to transfer that information to the final. You can't just do that with these jigs basically. So let's look at something more complex, full mouth rehabilitation, right? So she's definitely ready for something more aesthetic. And so here we do something similar, right? We establishing midline. You see here shifting a little bit. We have to shift her midline on number 9. Everything moved in her mouth base, in her face. So we have done a planning here. We establishing the plane of occlusion, and then we importing everything in our software. That's why we have to have everything aligned. That's why we need all these pictures in full face that we can merge them on our right side here on the screen. And we can now superimpose the models to that. and start basically with, here you see the smile, and that gets superimposed over the retracted. Cut out the lips, and then we start putting tooth shapes and tooth molds in her face with the correct planning. For her, it was funny because she told me, well, she's in San Francisco with her doctor. I'm in Miami, so we had FaceTime meetings, a lot of them, and she told, well, I want to have really big teeth. I'm a big girl. So, okay, a big girl. I wouldn't do this. I explained to her we should maybe do this mold, and now she was adamant, I want to have square, big teeth. Good, let's do it. So we did for her square, big teeth, planned it, and she's, I love it, love it, love it. All teeth all over the place, great. So we did the planning like this, nice and square, straight, big teeth. Imported that planning to our implant planning software. By the way, you're also working with the Cois facial analyzer here, you can tell. So we actually got the record from the doctor, and we have that scan, so we can actually merge that together, so we have that perfect horizontal. And then start planning the implants. In co-diagnostics here, after implant planning, we design the surgical guides. In this case, we do stackable guides. So stackable guides for implants and for provisional. So we have a complete controlled provisionalization. This word is a killer for my German tongue, telling it. Temporization. I know a dentist in a car, he will say, don't say temporization, but it is a temporization for me. So temporization is much easier for me to speak. So we do a full... For my German tongue, it's like I have 5 knots in my tongue after that. I know, right? I'm weird, as you can tell. So we have basically a full control temporization. And here the single pieces basically ready to go for surgery. And that's after surgery. And you can tell we just did 1 arch. Why did we just do 1 arch? We planned for a double arch surgery. Well, I got a phone call from San Francisco at some point throughout the day, because I'm always like in contact with my doctors. She swallowed a screwdriver. They have to go to the hospital and x-ray her. She came back, they continued, she swallowed another screwdriver. She swallowed on that day 3 screwdrivers. So because they had to go every time by protocol to the hospital and make an x-ray to make sure the screwdriver is in the right place to get at some point out again, they basically couldn't do the second arch. So the second arch was the week after, right? So it's never had that before, but hey, sometimes always the first time. So you can tell big teeth here, right? But what you also can tell, the planning was very well done in terms of aesthetic principles. We have the midline is like almost spot on, right? The plane of occlusion is almost spot on, right? The left side is a little bit too long, which in a conversion can happen, but that's easy to fix, right? It's a very simple fix basically. We also understood, she understood then also, all right, my teeth are too big. Let's do that different. So what we did here, we did the second arch, the lower arch the week later, and made her a new provisional for the upper as well in her vision, because all of a sudden she has all these photos 30 years ago. Oh, by the way, I look like this. Well, you should have told me this before, right? So now we could change the aesthetics for the upper. And we go back to this case in a little bit. I want to just now go after surgery, after we have patient temporized. After we have it temporized, we're waiting usually 3 to 4 months for until the implants are integrated and we can actually do the final restoration, start the final restoration. What's the crucial method is always a verification check, right? We want to verify our implant position. So now you can say, well, you told us about photogrammetry, so great. Yes, with photogrammetry, we can skip that step. Okay? So photogrammetry, I would say out of 100 cases, 99 are great. That's my experience on my side, right? And the one most likely we screwed up, or somebody screwed up who took the record, right? So it's not the system. The system is really accurate. It's usually the user error, right? So yes, with photogrammetry, I would say you can mostly skip the verification check and can go straight to a prototype. But usually, not everybody uses photogrammetry, so I want to show the verification check. Verification check, my gold standard is a stone verification check. Why stone? Because stone behaves very similar to zirconia. If you torque it down, it doesn't fit passively, it breaks, right? It's a very easy verification. It breaks, that's not a headache, we just fix it, right? We fix the break with pattern resin and take a pickup impression over basically for a new master cast. And always with a custom tray, because that jig will be hard fitting into a stock tray. How to do stone verification jig? Well, you use non-engaging temporary cylinders or impression copings. We box it with wax and we pour low expense and dye stone in there basically. We use GC Fuji rock, what we usually use. We leave it dry overnight. Next day, we finishing it up and sending it out, right? No more cracking of zirconia. That's, by the way, happened on day of inserting this little break here. Here. So where do we see that this is a break for non-passivity? Because both pieces are not together, right? You see the break, there's a fracture gap in between that will tell you that restoration did not fit passively. Another alternative way, especially for when we have photogrammetry, usually it's not that of a disaster after photogrammetry scanning, but that would be another idea to do actually from the records on day of surgery to do PMMAs, prototypes, segment them if they don't fit on the next, after 3 months basically, trying and reconnect them, right, for a new cast, for a new master cast basically. That's another method to do. The stone jig will be more accurate though, or more, it's more dumbed down basically, right, because you know it immediately if it doesn't fit. The PMMA or even the printed resin can give slightly. So prototyping, it would be the next, right? So prototyping is also a crucial method after. So usually we do surgery, day of surgery, we do scanning, record taking, scanning, right? With scan bodies, we're creating a provisional either on the same day or day after and taking the record of the adjusted provisional, and we can design a prototype. This prototype usually gets sent out then for 3 months later trying in after implants are integrated, right? And again, prototypes, try to make them really nice. Try to make them as good as you're able to do the final. That's very important, right? So here you see the prototype. Sometimes if we have doubts, we are also sending with the prototype a stone verification jig just to verify, just to make sure, but we're not losing an appointment because of that. With digital dentistry nowadays, we saving 1 or 2 full appointments to do the final because we're getting all the records on day of surgery. Scanning of the immediate provisional adjusted already, right? So we have already the vertical, at least as good as we needed for a prototype trying 3 months later. So we call it usually verification, record taking trying. We call verification, confirmation, realization, right? The realization is then the final basically. This is a 3-step approach. Here another prototype combination for immediate implant loading. You can tell these are not grills, by the way. This is just the old restoration, composite, right? So that patient already had existing implants in the posterior area. We're adding multiples to that, 4 actually, you can tell on the left where the shells are. So we can create already a really accurate prototype or provisional and then give the doctor something to reline over new placed implants for immediate loading. Right, that allows you then to have actually a nice case and finish that case relatively quickly after integration of the implants. And that's easier usually with intraoral scanning than with physical records with PVS. Why? Because we're already getting that vertical dimension, the VDO, in the scan with the bite. It's very accurate. Prototyping, a prototype trying, yeah, what we usually do, we're printing the prototype for a trying or milling it, depends if the patient is going to wear the prototype for longer than 2 weeks. We mill the prototype in PMMA. If the patient is not wearing it or just for a few days, we're usually printing the prototype. And then in this case, that's a very difficult case because you can tell the patient on his right side of the lip has a lazy lip. There's a slight asymmetry besides his nose, it's the same as I have. You can tell, so we define the midline. That doctor just used floss basically in a nice shot, nice photo right on. And we created here then the final restoration. And you see that lazy lip here, so we had to lift the plane of occlusion on the right side. We could not follow the lip, otherwise everything would be asymmetric. And it really suits him nice, right? Again, symmetry is very hard because human beings are not symmetric. So we want to find that aesthetic symmetry, that aesthetic balance in the face. That's what you're looking for. Here's our lady from before. So we see the prototype in the lower is in. Now we see the upper is adjusted. It's a different shape, different molds. Suits her much better, right? definitely much better. She's much more happy, so we can take the record of that and can finish that case. In this case, we utilized a milled titanium bar with individual crowns, like a copy mill bar. Then we put crowns, ceramic crowns on top, zirconia crowns actually, and composite for the gingiva. I personally like the composite, like that combination, because the doctor's always able to add composite in the mouth if there's any recession in the future, right? And these cases, there are recessions coming up. That's most of the time that gingiva is changing shape over the age of the patient, while of the year space is normal, right? So that was the final case, and she was definitely very happy with that. So suits her much better than the big chicklet teeth. So again, we have a three-stage approach. We have treatment planning with surgery is first stage, first appointment with the patient when we're actively starting the case. Second is the prototype try-in after 3 months, and the third is the inserting of the final. That's usually our 3 appointments, what we have nowadays, with utilizing photogrammetry or just IOS and the correct records, the correct devices like prototypes, etc. for that. So now let's talk about material choice. How much time do we have, Donnie? Till 5:30, right? And if you have any questions, just raise your hand, please, okay? I just don't want to bombard you. So restorative material choice, of course, zirconia, right? That's like nowadays our metal, basically, right? We utilize the zirconia a lot, right? Some people not. I mean, in my world, I use definitely zirconia the most. I still do PFM, very clear. I use SLM. I don't cast anymore in the lab, by the way. I use Argen for my SLM crowns, for my SLM frameworks to do PFM, and also for my partial frameworks, basically, so I don't cast at all in the lab. I sold my casting equipment 5 years ago. Done, right? I have one burnout oven for lithium disilicate to burn out to press. I still press. I don't mill that because economically it makes more sense. Also, I feel the material quality is better after pressing on lithium disilicate to that point. So I'm still like to do that. So I have one burnout furnace. That's it, right? I'm pretty happy with that because the smells in the lab are less. It's very clean. So another quick case here. Treatment planning is a fully digital treatment planning on her. She has overdentures over ball attachments, or mini implants actually. Yeah, we call it mini implants maxi problems. Right? They're never really stable or rarely stable for a long time. So I like mini implants for a temporary solution until we find something better for the patient. And we can treatment plan something better. It also comes down, of course, of finance, right, of the patient. But if possible, we try not to the mini implants in a restorative way. So she was not happy over the time, so we digitized everything. We scanned her. We scanned the video with her dentures. We're able to have that in our software, and then created basically surgical templates in same combination with the mock-up, right? With a new setup, with a new midline definition, with new molds, and utilize these to create surgical guides. You see here, there's a very small guide sleeves. The doctor here wants to do like just pilot hole drills, basically, just drill pilot holes and then do freehand surgery afterwards. You will never hear me saying this is not good or this is better. It really comes down to the user, right? Some like this, some like this. It depends on the patient as well, right? I cannot use for every surgery stackable guides. I'm sorry, I can't. Maybe you can, I can't, right? So I use that guide methodology, what we actually is ideal for that specific case. You have to understand all the different guide specifics to really consult your client on what guide should be preferred for that specific case. So for this case, he preferred just pilot drills, and freehand the rest, right? And then we have these mini implants here. They will be taken out after the implants are integrated. Then we do a verification. That verification jig broke, for example, right? So obviously the record was some sort of inaccurate, either on record taking or my model wasn't correct. Who knows? It doesn't matter. We do a verification jig, and we're able then to do prototypes as well. And that allows us to the prototypes to see here pink on upper and lower. We decided later on actually to the upper the lower as an FP1, right, for space disbalance, right? You see here now we had to give her some papillas for the upper, so we see here the final case, and the lower you see is the FP1. There's a little bit of stain, a pink stain, to kind of give a nice transition. but that's about it. So we didn't have space for a hybrid for an FP3 on the mandible. Yeah, final result. Maxilla is the hybrid design, mandible is the FP1. And zirconia-wise, deciding for the zirconia, I use the Argen, the Argen Z HT Plus. Why? Because I need a full strength zirconia here, still in a nice aesthetic. So I use the multi-layered blank because I don't want to layer anything except the pink. So in this case, there's nothing layered. It's all just stain and glaze. The pink is layered. I use GC porcelain for that, right? Pink porcelain. So that's important to understand your materials. I couldn't use the SHT, would be much more aesthetic, more translucent, but it's not strong enough. I'll show you this in a sec. That's another case. I use the ST, right? So also multi-layered, but it's single crowns, right? The little implant bridge in the lower anteriors, I can utilize that material with no problem, right? But that gives me higher aesthetic, nicer not nicer, the other one is nice outcome too, but definitely higher aesthetic, especially for cases on teeth, on vital teeth, right? Because I can play with the underneath color. And that's a quick overview. I use mainly these two zirconias for my cases. If there are single crowns or if there are full arch or full mouth, right? The HT Plus, important factors what you have to look for when you decide what kind of material. Strength, 1250. That is enough strong to do a full arch bridge of 14 units and plus, no problem, right? If you look at the ST multi-layered, it's 850. That's not enough strength for a full arch case. That's enough strength maybe for a lower 4-unit bridge or for an upper 3-unit bridge, the max. I usually try to avoid bridges with that material generally, but if you have to on lower bridge, that's not a problem. What we shot is the case just now, the lower anterior bridge. It's a very small span, right? So you see, that's very important. The other zirconias I don't use a lot because we consider more multi-layer. Even for layer cases, I use the multi-layer because it allows you to actually do more micro-layering than really thick porcelain layerings. My micro-layering on zirconia usually is below 0.8 millimeters. We talk about 0.5, 0.3, 0.6 millimeters the most, what we actually layering. I don't use Mio, I use actually GC porcelain, not the liquid porcelain, not the liquid ceramic. Yeah, and then important is to understand the 4Y and the 5Y. The 5Y is the different zirconias blended together, and that creates a higher aesthetic basically. These charts, by the way, are on the Argen webpage. You can really look at them. This is a very important chart if you start utilizing multi-layered zirconias. I don't know if everybody of you done that till that far, but these are important because you have to understand where to put your object on the blank, right? You cannot use a 30 millimeter blank for a 5 millimeter crown. It doesn't make sense to waste a multi-layer blank for that, right? So utilize basically around 80%, 75, writing here 75, 80%, I would say 80% roughly should be the object in the blank. Then you can really take advantage out of the different layers and the different gradient of the color in the blank. And you see that here, right? From more chromatic to more translucent. And that will you see in your object. Really tricky it gets when you have a full arch case and different implant directions and you have to put it like this in a blank. You have to angle it in a blank. Then you have to start compromising to say, okay, where do I need the most aesthetic? Usually the anteriors. So I dial in the anteriors, and the posteriors I have to dial in later on with staining glaze, basically, right? So that's a compromise what you have to go to understand. That's important to understand that. Most softwares, nesting softwares, they even show you the blank in the gradient in a translucent form. Did you see it? So you can put the crown in the right position in the blank to know where your ideal position is. And then we have the titanium bars, right? So show you here a case where we did basically a double structure. Why are we using titanium bars as a support for zirconia nowadays? Is there anybody who did not use yet the titanium bar under a zirconia full arch case? So everybody, you, great. So why are we using that? We're using this especially for bigger span implant distances, right? So for me, when I measure, for example, here, wait, that doesn't work anymore. Here, when I measure more than 20 millimeter distance between two implants, I'm going to need a support. I don't want to have my zirconia spanning that big span basically, right? So at that point, I would call my client and say, hey, listen, we need to add a titanium bar to that Zirconia hybrid or to that full arch, right? Or to that FP1, for example. We can also do FP1 bars, right? So that's important. Or here, right? This is that's a PMMA milled. We did the PMMA for trying basically here, but we have the bar already. But you see, this is even more than 30 millimeters you see here, right? So as soon as I have my span between implants, more than 20 millimeters, I'm going to go with the titanium bar supported structure, whatever veneering material I use. Let's say we use Zirconia, right? On a cantilever side, the same thing, right? AP spread. This case has a killer AP spread. I mean, you can go almost to the outside of the head with that cantilever, theoretically, right? Because how do you measure AP spread, right? The anterior-posterior spread. You take a line through the most anterior implants right in the middle, and you take a line distal of the most distal implants, and you measure the distance in the middle on the palate or in the lingual between these two lines. Here, let's say it's 10 millimeter as an example. And then you take that distance, that 10 millimeter, you multiply by 1.5. That makes 15 millimeters. And these 15 millimeters is the allowed cantilever length on each side of that bridge. Nobody's cooking right now. All right, that's good. We're all on the same page. Why I say that is because there are different philosophies out there. Some people will tell you, no, you cannot take times 1.5, you have to take times 1. Some will tell you, it's all bullshit. We don't need that. We always look at the case, we can differentiate. It depends on the length of the implant as well, and depends on the diameter of the implant and so on. That's all right. Like I say, there's nothing right or wrong, right? There are just experiences, there are statistics. What tells you that is right, there's statistics what tells you the 1 times 1 is right. And the statistics will tell you, well, depends on the diameter of the implant. This here is an average value. And I always say that when we talk about vertical dimension and space requirements for a hybrid, when we place implants, we'll tell you, well, you need 18 millimeters from the top of the implant to the incisal edge. It's an average value. Sometimes 14 are enough. Even 12 can be enough sometimes in some cases. Yeah, it's an average value, but we need average value to get some guidance. So if I take the measurement, if I measure the cantilevers, I will know immediately if I have to go 15 millimeter long as a cantilever, I cannot do full Zirconia. It would kill myself because 100% that hybrid will break if there is opposing dentition. If there's no opposing dentition, it's different, right? Because we have nothing to really force against that in the bite force. If you have opposing dentition, I would not go so long. I would most likely go maybe 10 millimeter, right? In this specific case, because we have already nice spread. Okay, maybe 10 millimeter, but I would most likely do with the titanium bar support, right? If I go more than 1 premolar size cantilever, I will have a titanium bar in there from a supporting my Zirconia. That's the ideal calculation. A premolar size length of a cantilever, I can easily do full contour Zirconia if all the thickness, everything is all right, right? But if it's more, I'm going to go with a titanium bar underneath. And then I'm able to mill my Zirconia, I'm able to mill my titanium, and I'm able to finish a case. Here we go. So now, in terms of designing, so what do we use to design actually that double structure? Because when I go back, I do titanium bars under Zirconia for many, many years already. And I always hated it doing it. Why? Because it was always clunky and it was never really clean design. So now you maybe all heard about Blender for Dental basically, right? That's a software, it's a third-party software. You can actually import your monolithic design into the software. And the software, with the help of the software, you can calculate the bar out of your design, and you have a primary structure with the bar and a secondary structure with your Zirconia substructure. It's amazing. You can take these both designs and mill it or setting it out to get milled. And it's amazing. It's working very amazing, right? So after that design, so I have to make a decision, right? Do I mill I can mill my titanium. Not everybody can mill titanium. I can, but even I don't do it. I do some cases, but if I look into that, the time, a titanium bar milling time is 6 hours plus, depending on the complexity of the design. A Zirconia is more than 6 hours, right? Full arch cases. So why should I block my machine for 6 hours when I can mill maybe 2 more zirconia hybrids in the same time, when I mill this and then another one, if I can send it out. So for me, like, that's the decision tree I make, right? I adjust the design after the prototype trying, I'm gonna adjust the digital design for the occlusion, what maybe has to get adjusted. I go through Blender, design my bar, and then I have to make a decision. Do I mill the bar and mill zirconia in-house? Do I send maybe the bar to Argen and mill the zirconia in-house? Or I mill the bar and send the zirconia to Argen to get the zirconia milled. Even that is definitely a valid thought process. Why? Because depending on your lab size, you don't want to maybe take the risk milling a full arch zirconia in-house. Why? Because if it breaks, you have to pay it again, because you have to get the blank. If Argen breaks it, they remill it for you. You don't even know that they broke it, right? So, and I'm not telling you guys, well, send everything to Argen to mill. It's not a commercial here. I'm a lab owner, right? So it's just a decision what you have to make sometimes. Even we have 3 milling machines in lab. We have a big one, a big puppy, right? With 30 blanks in there. We can mill all night, all weekend through. But even I do not mill everything in-house, just because I have to make economic decisions sometimes. What's more value for me to keep in-house? What is actually better just to send out? So I would say at least 60 to 70% of my bars, I will send to Argen, right? Or I'll be very honest, we have an authentic policy. If it's a pure Straumann bar, I'm gonna send it to Straumann, right? So it depends on the platform, but most of my bars are mixed, right? There's some Nobel, some Straumann, whatever. They all go to Argen, right? To get it milled there. The leftover 20, 30% I mill in-house are the cases I can't afford to send out because I'm timely already like on the corner, on the wall, and my client is shooting me, right? Because we have to finish the case. Why? Because we're in Miami, we are big cruise ship port, and we're getting these cases in. Oh, by the way, the patient's leaving next week, Monday. We have Thursday today. So these things happening constantly in Miami, so we have to sometimes really turning around cases, big cases, very, very fast, right? So I can't ship out the case. I have to do it in-house, so I have to be able to do that in-house. That's important. So we have to make a decision, what are you keeping in-house, what are you maybe outsourcing? Sometimes it's smart to say, hey, you know what, I have all these cases lined up, my capacity in the lab is great right now, but I want to keep it great. I'm going to send these 4 cases out and keep the other 4 cases here, and then whatever's coming on top, I'm going to replan again, right? So that's what we do. We always plan 2 weeks ahead in our laboratory. Yeah, so we're in the luxury right now, we can do it, but honestly, a year ago, I was in a situation, I was planning 2 days ahead, not 2 weeks. Right now, we're planning 2 weeks ahead of every case. So we know exactly, usually we are finished the case already far more than a week before the actually appointment when it has to get shipped out, right? So, but that's just because of proper planning and the equipment in the right places, basically. Then quick, an insight about Blender, how it works. And that would be a 30-minute video, so we really have to be here till 5. That's just snippets, right? Blender course will be a whole different animal, right? To really go deep into the software and explaining that. It looks very confusing on the screen here, I know that. So it is a little bit more intense as you maybe think in terms of visibility. It's actually very simple to do. Usually a bar design, when we have the monolithic design finished, a bar design, it takes 15 minutes out of Blender. 15, maybe 20 minutes when it's more complicated, when there's thin areas or so. So it's relatively simple. You just have to understand that right side here, right? And that will take, it's a learning curve basically. So there are many courses online. Blender is the company is helping you very nice. So it's a little bit of a learning curve to get there, but as soon as you know it, it's really simple to do. It's really awesome, right? So, but that will basically allow you then to create that bar, to create the zirconia, to finish a case really aesthetically, and you have that perfect, intimate transition from the titanium to the zirconia and vice versa, right? And that is nice, hygienic. Here you have the bars. These are Argen bars that came back. We sandblast them, and then they're getting cemented. And what we usually do then is we anodize them. Anodizing is its own whole story. Some people love it because it's so much more aesthetic. In reality, we tested it on abutments in the patient's mouth with the soft tissue, and we didn't see a difference. So I don't know if anodizing really is the golden, whatever you want to call it, the gold standard to really do something aesthetic, to not having that gray shine. We still see gray shine on anodized. I think it just looks killer. It just looks good, right? If you anodize your bar, it's not a lot of work. It's 2 seconds putting it in the anodizer and have a gold colored bar. You even can make a pink bar, right? Depending on the current you're running through your anodizer, can be blue, can be pink, can be yellow gold, whatever you decide to do. Aesthetically, I'm very honest, I didn't see a big difference. And then you have the final upper lower. Final result. Happy patients. Important is that message to go home is you cannot want the promise more than you want the process, right? It's all process, it's all protocol. If you leave the protocol, you're jeopardizing your restoration or your patient's happiness or your client's happiness, right? So go by the process, go by the protocol. That's the rule. Establish your own protocols, establish your own processes basically, but they just have to be solid. That's important. There's sometimes multiple processes or multiple protocols to the same result. Yeah, some of them are longer, some of them are shorter. Shorter doesn't mean always better, right? Shortcuts is never good, but shorter process doesn't mean necessarily better. It's good. But sometimes the longer process is more verifying, it's just better. So as a conclusion, we had the agenda treatment planning, we discussed the smile design, right? I encourage everybody at least get patients' photos. At least get patients' photos that you are able to actually evaluate the patient properly and give good advice to your client. The record collection, analog, intraoral scanning, photogrammetry, what's better? Your call, right? It depends on your hands and it depends on your client. Right? You cannot force your client to do photogrammetry or IOS. If they're really amazing and taking beautiful impressions, don't change them. Why? Right? I always say, I want to change a process what's super successful, economic, and makes profit. Why should I change the process then? So if to jeopardize maybe quality, I would never do that, right? So a good client who's happy and isn't even talking about digital for you, why would I change that? Keep going with him or with her, right? Prototyping, that's a test drive. Would you buy a car without test driving it? I'm not, 100% not. So always test drive your restorations. Why? Because always remember, every new modern digital material is actually, when we think about it, is irreparable. High-performance polymers, you can't glue if they break or if they cut it. Zirconia breaks, you can't solder it. It's broken, you have to restart it, right? Titanium, gold, we can cut and we can solder. Titanium is more tricky, but we can, right? So if you go with traditional materials, they're repairable, they're fixable basically in the process. Sometimes you're creating a gold bridge on purpose in pieces to put it in the mouth, to reconnect it, to solder it, to then put porcelain on. It's a wonderful technique, right? With modern progressive materials, we can't. So the test drive and the prototyping is even more important nowadays than it was 30 years ago, 20 years ago. Restorative solutions, monolithic versus integrated bar, right? So what's the golden rule here? Well, it depends on the case. It depends how far the implants are apart, basically, the distance. I go by the 20 millimeter rule. There are multiple different papers out there. They all give you different measurements, right? So like for me, 20 millimeters, that worked, right? I have success with that. So I'm not gonna go to 25 now. I don't. 20 is the max. And the integrated bar, like I say, cantilever-wise, 1 premolar size, it's my golden rule. I'm not doing a monolithic zirconia with longer than a premolar size cantilever without a bar. Done, right? Different zirconia types. Well, it's a choice for aesthetic and stability. Yeah, you can go with an HG plus, which is a high translucent zirconia, which is actually, in compare, lower translucent. With that zirconia, you usually can mask underneath discolorations. With an SHT, with super high translucent zirconia, you can't, right? So there you have to make sure your underneath structure, prepped teeth, are vital. They're not root canal. If you have a root canal tooth, do not use this material. Even if the tooth is beautiful right now, that tooth can be pitch black in 6 months, Right? Keep that in mind. So as soon as you know you maybe lose control over the underneath and something can change over time, you have to always have your second parachute with you. Right? You have to always be able to say, to know, well, I don't care actually because I use a material where I can mask whatever's underneath. Yeah? So that's important. Are there any questions? Whoa, okay, yes.
It's a very specific question, but you go in depth in all kinds of aspects of design of these full arch cases. There is a situation where some implants are fitted with multi-unit abutments and some others on the same arch are not. What's your take on that kind of restoration? Could it be an all zirconia restoration, and how do we torque them at different values on different platforms?
That's an awesome question. Everybody got that, right? Okay, your voice is transferring amazing, so it's really good. So the question is basically multiple different platforms, multi-unit and implant platforms for one arch, right? So I personally don't care if I have implant as a plain implant connection, fixture level basically, or implant level, or if I go on abutment level. I can do full arch on both situations. I can also do full arch on a mixed situation with no problem. The only thing, I'm careful if I go, for example, with full monolithic zirconia on a mixed situation. I have implant level and I have abutment level. I use titanium bases, of course. I'm not going with the full zirconia without titanium base in general. I don't do that, right? Even with photogrammetry and so I do not do full zirconia torqued to a metal surface. I don't do that. So I always go with titanium bases. That's my philosophy. So with that case, I would just do titanium bases, and they have to be non-engaging. Even the implant fixture level has to be non-engaging.
But can I refine my question?
Yes.
On multi-units, the torque value would be 10 to 15.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And let's assume that the others are implants with conical connection.
Correct.
You're going to torque to 35.
35, yes.
What kind of stress does that put on a bridge?
That's a good question. We torque for implant to implant on 35 and on multi-unit to 15. I don't have any issues with that.
But the bridge might have, because one
That's
end
a
of the bridge
that's
is
a
from
very, very
35
good question. Yes.
Stressed
Yeah.
up to 70 microns, and the other part of the bridge is on a flat connection. Multi is kind of a flat connection where you can torque all you want. That connection is not moving.
It's over here today. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's a phenomenal question actually. Like I say, so we always recommend our clients to torque to the torque value. It's recommended for the specific connection on a bridge. So if it's 15 for multi-unit and 35 for implant, it's that value we recommend to actually torque to. We do not have any issues to that point that something fractures because of that. So I cannot give you now a different answer since I never tried something differently. Like I say, when something works for me, I'm gonna go with that and not changing it. So we never realized a stress or stress fracture because of different implant connections or multi-unit and an implant connections at different torque values. We never realized that. I have to say, I don't say you're wrong. You're most likely right because it's logic, right? But the problem is if we now just torquing on an implant connection to 15, we actually losing strength to the connection because the screw is not as tight and the connection is not as intimate than on the multi-unit because that's torqued to 15 to the maximum torque. So the risk for having actual screw loosening on the implant platform is very high. And I would not like that risk because when I have screw loosening, at that point I'm risking a fracture. Because then we have maybe an unstable connection. And that also depends on where is the implant positioned, right? If I have that implant somewhere in between two other implants with multi-units and it's all torqued down, it's maybe not that risky. But if I have it, for example, on the distal, both implants, or all the anterior implants, multiples next to each other, they all of a sudden tend to maybe get loose. That's risky for fracturing as well. So it's not an ideal situation what you're explaining in general as a restorative solution, because I would always prefer having just one platform. It's the most straightforward, most secure situation, but it's a common situation we're facing every day. I mean, I have that on a regular basis, right? But we also recommend you torque to the torque value is recommended by that specific connection. And we didn't have any issues to that point. Cool. Charles, you had a question?
Yeah, so did you notice the difference between split file versus scanning the bar? Number one, and number two, when you send to Argen, do you have them center it or do you get sent back to the research?
Awesome question. So the easy answer, the sintering. If you outsource Zirconia, I would always let the outsource partner sinter. Why? Because green state is very fragile. In shipping, especially full arch, the risk for having then a fracture and you open the box, Argen will most likely cover it, I guess. I hope I don't say something wrong now, Donnie. But most likely, right? So, but you're losing time because then you have to go through a whole another milling and shipping. So I would always say, you know what, you sinter it and ship it a sintered product, right? So that's the easy answer. The other answer is, did we see differences in fitting, right, between the split file and blender for dental and in scanning the bar? So the answer is yes and no. Yes and no. Why is it always comes down to complexity of the bar design. And that was a learning curve at the beginning when we started blender. Dude, we were like, that's why my whole hair is gray here. One of the reasons why, because it was definitely not easy to figure out the ideal setting. And setting changed with bar design and size, right? So it was not easy to figure out the ideal design for the ideal fitting, basically. It took a while, took a couple restorations to make sure it fits perfectly. Now we're there actually where we say to 95, 90% for almost all cases, the fit is extremely intimate. Very, very intimate. When we scan a bar, I would say it's almost the same. I do say when we scan the bar, it's even better, right? The only problem is when we scan a bar and design, the design is more tricky to do. Or you can do a wax copy, basically. Yeah, you can do that too, but then you get more like a softer design. You have to do more work on that, basically. So it is a game now what you play between, okay, do I spend some time of that superstructure fitting on the bar to make that super intimate? Or do I spend the time on the green state to make it more pretty when I do a wax up copy, basically fitting on the bar? So and that's an exocad thing, so we can, is everybody an exocad here in the room or some of the 3Shape? Who is the 3Shape? All right, and who's exocad? That's 50-50. So with exocad, we have different kind of ways to do it, right? We can do the blender for dental, we can do a bar design and then take that and design a structure on top, or we can do a wax up copy, basically, where we can wax up copy whatever is underneath just on top, right? Like a cup, which is really cool. But what we realize is the design is softer a little bit. So it washes out slightly details. So we have to then refine that again. So I personally actually prefer doing the blender, have a real detailed, beautiful milled design, and then do some fitting afterwards if necessary. That's what my preference is right now. Cool. Any more questions? And by the way, 3Shape doesn't mean it's not good enough, right? So don't get me wrong. It's just a different workflow, right, with 3Shape. And I'm not, to be honest, I'm not as familiar with that because I'm running, I would say, to 95% all my designs to exocad. 3Shape utilizing usually for encodes for Bioma 3R, for example, encode empowered. So we're running encodes for 3Shape and some custom abutments with vendors. They just accept 3Shape files, basically. I'm not a 3Shape guy, so I'm like really exocad driven here, so that's why I cannot really give a very smart answer on the 3Shape side, how that works with Blender, but it works. There's definitely a workflow to do. Cool. Questions? We're good? Awesome. So I will say thank you, guys. There's my handle, so if everybody wants to get in touch with me afterwards, I will be happy to answer more questions or have an interaction. It's not a big deal. Please message me, DM me. And yeah, I would say thank you for hanging out with me.